How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we're going to be talking about the 6 games that I am most looking forward to on this year's CFL schedule, now that we're confirmed to have a season, and I'm really excited to get into it today. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I greatly appreciate all the support, especially with the season coming up. It's going to be awesome. Roster reviews are going to be in the works in the next coming weeks, and you don't want to miss it. And with that said, let's get started. So before we dive in, just a couple of notes here. I tried to stay away from games that were, everybody's obviously looking forward to, like the Labor Day Classics. Those are really the highlights of the CFL schedule almost every year, as well as the kickoff game with the Blue Bombers hosting the Tiger Cats in the Grey Cup rematch from 2019. I tried to stay away from those obvious ones, and I also tried to include one game for every team, so every team at least will be represented on this list. And with that said, let's start off at number 6, and it's going to be the Toronto Argonauts visiting the Montreal Alouettes in Week 8 in September. This is going to be really interesting because the Argos play the Tiger Cats 4 times, but they only play the Alouettes twice. And the Owls play the Red Blacks 4 times, but the Argos only twice. And I think this is interesting because I think these are the 2 teams that we're going to be seeing battle it out for the number 2 spot in the East. It's really going to depend a lot on these 2 matchups. If either side can sweep these 2 matchups, it's going to be very important for them making the playoffs and advancing their cause in the standings. It's just a really interesting matchup in general. I think Toronto's roster has rapidly improved, but I think that Montreal's a very solid roster with, a really good receiving core. They have a very good playmaking quarterback in Vernon Adams, and by this point in the season, in Week 8, we will know a lot more about this Argos squad than we do now. At number 5, we have the Ottawa Red Blacks visiting the Saskatchewan Roughriders in Week 3. Ottawa starts off the season in Edmonton and then has a bye week in Week 2 before going to Saskatchewan in Week 3. And I think this really goes for every team in the CFL this season. I think a lot of it depends on how these teams start out the season. In such a short season, it's going to make a huge difference, especially for a team like Ottawa, who is coming off such a poor performance in 2019. I think they really want to flip the script early, and this is a big test going into probably a packed Mosaic Stadium, and it's going to be crazy to see that atmosphere there and how this Matt Nichols, Paul LaPolice connection starts developing in the first couple weeks here in the 2021 season. I'm also really interested to see how the Riders do in their second full season under quarterback Cody Fajardo, if he can replicate that MOP candidate success that he showed in 2019. Gonna be really interesting. Now moving on to number 4, we have the BC Lions visiting the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Week 9 in October. Really interesting here because I think BC, looking at their schedule, they don't really face this dominant defensive line in the first half of their schedule. They play Edmonton once, but I don't think Edmonton, with the loss of Armando Sewell, is as good as they were in 2019, where they were basically unblockable by this BC Lions offensive line. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this BC team is at that point in the season in Week 9, if they're still in the thick of the playoff race, if they're going to be able to shut down a guy like Willie Jefferson, or at least contain him to a degree they couldn't show in 2019. And it's just going to be very interesting in that regard. Winnipeg, on the other hand, we'll have to see if Zach Collaros stays healthy at this point in the season. This will be midway through the season, so it's going to be interesting to see if he can put together a full season that we haven't really seen in a few years. And like I said, I'm just really excited to see if the Lions under Mike Riley can return to form and compete for a playoff spot here in 2021. At number 3, we have Calgary visiting Hamilton in Week 7. Should be very interesting because Hamilton, a lot of people are predicting them to be the favorites for the Grey Cup this year. And rightfully so. I think they have arguably the best roster in the CFL. But the one team over consistently throughout Tiger Cats' recent memory that has dominated this team, it's the Calgary Stampeders. Typically, this is usually when they play at McMahon Stadium, which they won't in this case. They're not actually going to McMahon Stadium this season. the only game they play Calgary is going to be at Tim Hortons Field. But now that Bo Levi Mitchell is back healthy, if Bo by week 7 is really back in his full form and back to being that best caliber quarterback in the CFL. In the game that Hamilton beat Calgary in 2019, Nick Arbuckle actually started that game. I think it was week 5 of that season. We'll have to see how this Tiger Cats team responds to playing Bo Levi Mitchell, and if this Stampeders team is a weaker version than we've seen in recent years. And this team hasn't missed the playoffs in, I think it's like 13, 14 years. I think they definitely have the longest playoff streak in the CFL by a wide margin. And it's going to be very interesting to see if Calgary can really continue this run of dominance, really. A lot of people are kind of saying their roster's a lot weaker this year compared to recent years, at least in terms of CFL experience. So really interested to look and see what happens between Calgary and Hamilton in week 7. At number 2, we have the Edmonton Elks visiting the Saskatchewan Roughriders in week 14. And they also play them in week 15 as well, so it's a back-to-back here. I'm really fascinated to see this matchup in particular because these were 2 great games at the end of the 2019 season. Edmonton actually almost upset Saskatchewan, took away that number 1 seed, but Saskatchewan was able to pull it together. Cody Fajardo put together a really good drive at the end of that first game of that back-to-back. And I'm really interested to see because I think the Elks have one of the most talented rosters in the CFL this season. I know I'm kind of spoiling my roster review here, but they look loaded pretty much at every position. And I think that the Riders, there's a lot of questions surrounding them too. And I think at this point of the season, it's very likely that these are 2 of the teams that are going to be fighting for that last playoff spot. They're going to be right in the midst. I don't see either of these teams being out of it by that point in the CFL season. And I'm very interested to see who wins those back-to-back. Again, if somebody could sweep those 2 matchups, it will go a long way. And at number 1, we have the Toronto Argonauts at the Calgary Stampeders in week 1. This is the earliest game I have on this list by quite a margin here. But the reason why I'm so excited to watch this game is because, one, again, you got the Calgary storyline. Everybody's saying that Calgary is not as strong as they have been in recent years, and that top spot in the West really is up for grabs. And then for Toronto, they have this entire facelift that they had this offseason, bringing in the new quarterback, basically new players at almost every position. All of these new pieces that are coming together. There were no preseason games in 2021, and it's going to be interesting to see how that roster looks on opening day and who's going to be starting at all these receiver positions and defensive line positions. It's going to be interesting to see how these things all come together on the opening day of the season. Is it a train wreck? Does it look great? Does it show great promise? I don't know, but I'm so excited to watch that team because there's such a boom or bust potential I could see with this roster. With that said, that is going to be the end of today's video. I want to thank you all for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button and subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. I appreciate all the support, and be sure to let me know in the comment section what game you're most looking forward to seeing in the CFL this season. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.